Redefining Medtech shares the stories of clinicians, executives, inventors, entrepreneurs, and researchers who are transforming healthcare through the development of medical technology. Through our in-depth interviews, digital health leaders will share their journeys, offering you insights into cutting-edge technologies and how to integrate them into your practice. This is Redefining Medtech.
We are pleased to welcome Dr. Philippe Douyon, a Board Certified Neurologist. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, tell us about your journey to becoming a neurologist.
Sure. So, I think my first experience with any kind of brain disorder was I had a grandmother who had Alzheimer's disease. I had a cousin who had epilepsy growing up, and she eventually grew out of that. But I got to see how brain disorders significantly impacted people's lives. It had a physical toll, it had an emotional toll, it impacted the family. So it really impacts every aspect of somebody's being when they have a neurological diagnosis, as opposed to some of the other disorders that we deal with. And then the other thing too, I was born and raised Catholic. And when you're born and raised Catholic, you're taught that you're created in the image of God. And for me, the parts of us that are most God-like are our spirits and our brains. And our brains, because our brains are capable of creating both our internal environment and external environment. And so I always had this fascination with the brain. And even though when there's something that goes wrong with it, it can be incredibly disturbing. But when the brain is functioning the way that it's meant to, it's incredibly beautiful and empowering. And it's the reason that we have so many incredible things in this world.
Later today at MedTech, you'll be leading a presentation titled Using Gamification to Prevent and Manage Chronic Disease. Can you tell us a little bit about that talk?
Sure. So, I've been an epilepsy specialist and in private practice for about 6 years. And I always found the biggest impact I've ever had on any of my patients wasn't when I prescribed them a pill or took them to the OR to do epilepsy surgery. It was really when I taught them about all of the things that were impacting their neurological health, all of the things that they could do outside of medicine in their everyday lives that could minimize their seizure frequency. And so when you're teaching people about their health, you want to find a way to simplify it. You want to find a way to meet them where they're at. And so I created this company, the Inley BrainFit Institute, where one of the things I wanted to do was create exercise programs for people based on their medical and neurological disorders. Because I found that physical activity gives our brains everything that they need to be as efficient as possible. And so I knew that along with the exercise program, I wanted a technology aspect to that, and figured that creating a game, creating an app was a really good way to meet people where they're at. Right? And so when we are interacting with our patients, we have 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes to do so. And we need to see, some of us see 20 to 30 patients a day. So it's not a lot of time to discuss things that are pretty complicated. And you want to discuss them in really simple ways so that people get it. When people come to see us, more than 50% of Americans are health care illiterate. So they don't understand health, they don't understand health problems as well as health solutions. And so you want to find a way to make that information readily accessible to them. And I found that using games is a really great way to do that. If you had told me 3 years ago that I would have an app or a game, I probably would have told you that you're crazy. Because I don't download apps, I don't play games, right? But it's not about me, it's about meeting people where they're at. And people are constantly on their phone, right? Constantly just looking down, doing whatever on their phone. And so I thought the phone was a great medium in order to reach them. And so created this game, Dr. Douyon's BrainFit, which is a game that teaches people about how food and exercise impacts their overall health, but especially the health of their brain. And the concept is pretty simple. It's a matching game. You match healthy foods and healthy activities.
Oh, cool.
Right? And so there's 40 levels to the game. Each level represents a different disease state. So starting with sedentary lifestyle, moving to things that are preventable chronic diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, then moving to neurological diseases like stroke. And the last level is Alzheimer's disease. And so while people are matching healthy foods and healthy activities throughout the levels, there are questions that come up every 6 or 7 matches or so related to that particular level, that particular disease state. And so that way people are learning both consciously as they're answering questions, but also subconsciously as they're just matching. And so we've had pretty good success with that game. People have really enjoyed it.
And they stay engaged?
They stay engaged. You know, one of the feedbacks we get a lot is that it's a little addictive, which is not at all the point. So I tell people, you know, you don't want to play this game more than 10, 15 minutes a day, right? As opposed to being on it for an hour or a couple hours a day and trying to get through these levels. But not only are people staying engaged, but one of the feedback, one of the testimonials that we got, which I had never meant, but it was, you know, it was really emotional when I heard this from one of my former patients. And she's somebody who's had refractory epilepsy her entire life. And she said, you know, it was like I was battling my epilepsy while playing this game, right? And so medicine in general tends to be very passive from the patient's perspective. It is, take this pill. It is, you know, we're gonna do this surgery for you. But we don't ask patients to do a lot. And so even when they're doing something like playing a game, it can be incredibly empowering for them.
Mm-hmm. So what challenges and breakthroughs do you envision for the field of neurology in the coming decades?
So I think one of the really important things is that we've learned more about the brain in the last 20 years than we have in the previous 200 years, right? And we still don't know anywhere close to everything about the brain. But one of the things that we do know is that the brain is constantly changing. It is constantly evolving. Our brain is really plastic. And in my book, Neuroplasticity, Your Brain's Superpower, this is something that I talk about, how every action we take, every thought we have changes our brain and influences our brain, right? And so as a neurologist, one of the things that I often see is that people have neurological disorders because of preventable chronic diseases, right? And I think the challenge going forward is to not think of the brain as this isolated thing that is completely separate from the rest of the body, right? And people develop dementia because long-standing high blood pressure and diabetes, and people think that somehow that shouldn't impact their brain. People develop inflammatories of their brain because they've got inflammatory disorders affecting their body, right? And so it's treating their entire body as if it is one unit. And so the tagline for my company, and it's on our bracelets, it's on t-shirts, is one brain, one body. Because everything that we do, everything that we put into our body impacts our brain. And I think the biggest challenge and the biggest benefit we're going to see is really getting that message out to people. One of the things that I tell people often, and I don't think that they realize, so when people drink alcohol, when they go, they get a little buzzed, when they get drunk, it's because the impact alcohol is having on your neurons, on your nerve cells, right? So everything, the foods that we eat, the level of activity, all of that impacts our brains. If we're sedentary, that actually kills neurons. We are meant to move. We are meant to run, to jump, to squat, to dance, to do all kinds of movements. And at the helm of that, controlling that, is our nervous system. It's our brain and spinal cord. And I think if we minimize preventable chronic diseases, we'll see people's neurological health significantly improve. And I think that's really where the breakthroughs are going to be. You know, I can only think of one treatment in all of medicine that's a cure. Everything else is symptom management. And so the move has to be towards preventing neurological disorders. Because by the time neurological disorders are sort of in full swing, it becomes incredibly difficult to manage, right? And so one of the things that people are always terrified of is Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest myths of Alzheimer's disease is that lifestyle has nothing to do with it. It is very much a lifestyle disease, right? And so if people have chronic diseases that they're not taking care of, that significantly impacts your risk of getting Alzheimer's. There are some neurologists, neuroscientists that will tell you that there's such a close correlation between diabetes and Alzheimer's disease that some people will call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes.
Wow.
And whether you agree with that or not, the reality is that our brains can't handle huge swings in blood pressure and blood sugar. Right? The smallest vessels in our brain can't tolerate those changes really well. And that's going to cause degeneration of the brain that we can see on CAT scans and MRIs. Right? And we can call it a different type of dementia because Alzheimer's is just a type of dementia, and there's several different dementias, but the end result is the same. It's people who have memory problems, people who have lost themselves, people who can't remember their family. It's people who can't go about their daily lives. And there's no pill that's going to reset that. Not Aricept, not Namenda, nothing else that they may be working on. It's really getting to a place where we can prevent some of these things from occurring to begin with.
That's promising, though.
That is. I think it's incredibly empowering. Yeah. The idea that our brains are plastic, that our brains are constantly changing, lets us know that we are built to evolve, right? And therefore, we never have to stay in whatever life situation is impacting us in that moment. We can evolve out of anything, as long as we're doing the work that we need to be doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Redefining Medtech.